In Chapter 3, with our ninja's head complete, we can move on to the rest of the body, starting with the torso. So this picks up directly where we left off at the end of Chapter 2. I'll just drag the split area of the window there to even it out, and then hit N in the properties, and under display go to grid floor and uncheck that. I'll then come to open in my image editor, and open my full body reference, and there's a link to that in the description below. I only needed to load it into my file, so I'm going to switch back to the Ninja concept and then come down into the properties and turn on background image and just select the body reference out of the pop down menu there. So once again I'll just use the X and Y manipulation to get it into a position that feels nice compared to the mask, the size of the mask. And then just as before, I'm going to make some reference points with planes, and then on the left here will be my front reference, so I'll also turn that to my full body concept and just place the image to fit inside those reference points. So I've got one at the tip of the fingers in that left drawing, also one at the point of the elbow. You can see those two lines crossed there to give a good indication, and another at the top of the head, and also another there at the bottom of the feet. And with that lined up, I'll just put them into layer 20 as well. And I'll just zoom out my concept art so I can see the torso there for reference. I'll Shift S snap my cursor to the mask object so it's in the mirror center, and then just click again further down so I can add a plane to begin modeling the torso. Now I'm going to delete 3 of the vertices, and then with the last one I can place that at the start of the chest there, just at the bottom of the neck area, top of the collarbone. And begin just tracing the vertices down the front of his torso. Again, in the front view, I'll pick up and start tracing the side. And I'll place that top vertice just on the armpit, and then up and over around the point where the bicep meets the shoulder. I'll then begin tweaking the vertices to fit the side reference. Again, just jutting out those vertices forward that will go out and over the arm. And then just trace along the collarbone and over the shoulder to meet at the side trace. I'll then come in and add a mirror modifier, and I'll need to change my axis to Z. I'll then pull out extruding from one of the vertices there in the middle that I've put just at the just above the sternum, and then trace out underneath the pec and meet up at the shoulder as well, just one loop back from the side trace. I'll make another trace now. I'm branching out from where we'll define the area at the top of the abdominals and lining along the bottom of the rib cage. And once again, I can just go in to my side view and pull those vertices back and match them up with my side reference again. So I can just see where the bottom of the pec is, and by selecting another vertice and one out on the hips there and hitting F and subdividing a couple of times, I can make another trace just above the belly button, moving out to the hips. And then this bottom area of the trace here, I'm just going to match from the top of the waist down along the pelvis. So now that we've converted this 2D concept into some 3D elements, we can begin adding some faces to this model. So by selecting the bottom 3 vertices of the pec here, I'm just going to extrude them up twice, and then on the second extrusion that goes up quite a bit higher, I'm going to make that middle vertex a little bit higher than the other 2, and then in side view I can just match down to my reference again. I'm keeping in mind that the extrusions that I make will also match my trace in the middle there, but I can always modify the trace if I'm pretty happy with the amount of faces that I'm adding as I start to fill in the mesh now. The trace really is a reference in itself, so as I go in and fill the vertices in with faces, if there's more loops I need to make, more loop cuts, I can always change the trace and add or take away any vertices. I'm now going to just select these two vertices here in the middle, subdivide once and move the vertice up a little bit closer to the collarbone. And then also subdivide here on this very side area of the trace near the shoulder, just to match the extra vertice that I have on the second trace inward. I'll then connect that to the vertice I made before. I'd hit F to make a face and subdivide it a few times. And then I'm just pushing this trace up and over the shoulder, as that area looks, as you can tell by the reference, a little bit bulging out from the muscle. So I'm making sure to keep that a little bit closer to the very top trace of the shoulder. Now I'm also noticing that as the shoulder muscle comes in towards the collarbone, it will dip inward a bit. So in my side reference, I just pull that vertice back a bit and then have it jut out again as the collarbone rolls around towards the center. Then I'm just having a little look and making some minor tweaks as I need to. Every character is different, and the more that I'm experimenting on the topology of a character, the more I'll use these traces to flesh out the ideas that I have for loop cuts that will work and topology that will give me the shape that I want. And then when I'm feeling confident with an area, then I'll go in and add faces in. And I'm just working at a trace here for a transitioning area between the pecs and the bottom of the rib cage. So this area is really defining the shape and thickness of the whole middle chest area. So I'm just going to zoom out and take a whole look at the trace of the front area of the torso. And I'm pretty happy with everything, though the pec muscle usually comes up and really comes over the armpit to the shoulder. So I figure I might just dive in and move this edge loop here by deleting this vertice and reattaching the face. And then to avoid a try, I'm just going to make a subdivide here and then add those faces down. So what that gives us is something basically like a loop derail, like I was doing back in the mask chapter in chapter 2. So now I'm really going to start going in and connecting faces in. And because I'd taken a general look at the vertices on parallel traces, I was able to keep about the same amount of vertices, and I'm just adding one or two more in as I need them. And you can see here I've got these vertices that are jutting out that I extruded earlier, and that will define the shape of the pec. So I can tweak those to push them out or in more to give the pec more definition. Again, I'm just going to delete an edge here so I can add a loop cut to only that area, and I've just Alt-S scaled out a bit, and that middle cut there will give the fleshed out feel of the pec. And I've just made another loop at the very outside top area of this pec here so that I can make a diamond quad at the bottom, and that once again stops the try from popping up and causing some weird deformation. Now I figure the edge loops could flow a little better here, so I'm just going to make another cut in that shoulder area after deleting the edges to make the faces disappear. And then I'm just going to get rid of this edge here as well, and then get a nice smooth couple of edge loops flowing up into the shoulder. And then I'll begin just generally adding some faces and a loop cut in the middle. And after making the loop cut, I can just merge some vertices at either end, and that will continue the loop across. And that will also I can also make sure that any vertices that have been loop cut like that can be merged to the trace, and that will make sure that the shape stays to where I originally intended it. So now we have most of the top front of the chest covered in faces. I'll just get the basic collarbone area there that we'll start detailing a little bit later. So now I'll just take another look at the chest as a whole from a distance and see, is there anything else that could use some more definition? And after looking at my concept art again, you can notice, and also the reference, that the shoulder sort of pops out quite a bit, and the pec does as well, and there's this dip in the middle. So I might try and achieve that with vertices. I've deleted this vertice at the bottom inside of the shoulder, and then I'm going to add an edge to these two vertices here in the diagonal and subdivide. Move these vertices down a little bit to give it some space, and also add a face and subdivide those so I can make a diamond quad. And that will allow me to join those two faces together. And then I'll repeat this on the top right hand side where the shoulder is. So it's a bit of an advanced mesh editing technique there, but what you end up with is the possibility of giving some definition to both the pec and the shoulder blade with this nice little loop in the middle that can add a dip and show the definition on either side. Now really all that comes down to after that is just damage control, trying to fix up the rest of the mesh around it to assist it, because to me that was a very important part of the anatomy definition that I needed to add. So with that done, then I can just move down to the lower area of the front of the torso. Again, just making loop cuts, merging to my trace vertice, and then just tweaking the rest of the vertices to match my front and side reference again. And I figure I don't want to go down too far, as he's going to be wearing pants anyway, so I've just deleted one of the bottom edge loops there so that it becomes a little bit easier to work with. I'm really going by only what's seen, and that saves me time. Again, by being smart as to where I put these main edge loops, the in-between loops that I add can be either pushed in or out and closer to or further away from other edge loops to define the smoothness, sharpness, or any other definition that I need to make. Here I've just turned on clipping in the mirror modifier options and just alt-right click selected all the vertices going down the mirror point and just made sure to move them left and then right, just to make sure that everything is stuck to the mirror point. Then to get a better indication of my wireframe, I can come down here to the object buttons and just turn on wire. And as you see there, as I go into solid mode with Z, you can see the outline of the mesh as well. And now I'll turn my attention to the back of the torso. I've just made an extrusion from this vertice here at the start of the shoulder. And then I'm going to go into the side view and extrude downward, and again use the front view to push the vertice to the mirror point and subdivide, and just tweak the vertices to match. I've made this area at the top a bit more flat to represent the back area of the shoulder, and as you can see, I'm just joining to the very tip of the shoulder trace I did earlier, and then joining the faces there, making a couple of cuts. Again, use Alt-S to just push the vertices out. And I tried merging two of those vertices together at the neckline, but I decided I might add that back, as it keeps the loops quite nice there on the shoulder. So basically everything inside that back trace is going to be the trapezius muscles. So I'm going to work on them last though, and for now just work on everything outside and below in the back of the torso. So I've just made an extrusion down and made two faces here, joining it to the trace that I made. And going from the middle point of the trace where it joined the mirror point, I've just extruded that down the back. And here I'm just tracing out the armpit area that will go underneath the arm. I'll just join that to my back trace and subdivide again to give a bit more detail. And finally with the vertice that I made under the arm, I'm going to connect that to either the second bottom vertice, or I think I might attach it to the very bottom vertice of the back trace there. I've just subdivided and cleared the edge just so I can work some more on the tracing later on. So that trace basically leaves an area for the middle back known as the latissimus dorsi. And next to work on is this side area of the lower back known as the obliques. And they kind of diagonally come down around the side of the body. And really what I'm aiming for here is something like the Batman suit. It's sort of a thick material that's going to be covering his body, so it won't show every little nook and cranny of his anatomy, and it will give more of a stylized look. Think the Batman suit. So I've just traced out the bottom of the back area and just joined that trace that I did earlier to a subdivided new vertice there. And then we have, you can see I've just highlighted the back trace that will then begin filling in just as we did with the front. I'll start just by moving the back bottom of the trace down a little bit lower, and I don't want the side of the torso to be too complex, so I've just deleted this edge here and pulled the torso to go a little bit more up, as this is more of a stylized mesh that we're going for. I'm just going to work some vertices going up the center of the back, and then they've got to branch outward from this point here. So I'm making a diamond quad there, so again I've made myself another loop and just joining the faces together. Just making another diamond quad here so that I can give myself another loop free. And now I've got 5 vertices here, so I'm going to have to reattach some vertices and break my original side trace that I made. And that's basically to allow the loops to come down diagonally to get those muscles that come around the side. Basically giving him some love handles. I'm going to make another loop cut down the bottom here so that I can merge those 2 vertices together at the side trace point. And if I get into a bit of a rut in terms of topology, I just delete some of the edges and leave what works, and just work out a plan to rebuild the mesh. And as you can see there, I just had a look at the vertices I had and how I can attach the vertices together, and that worked quite well. And now just with the topology made, I can concentrate on getting the form a bit right and just tweaking the smoothness of the vertices in each loop. And I trace possibly for something that's too detailed, so I'm actually going to go in and delete this whole row of vertices. What I had there before would work great for a topless character, but since he does have some thickish cloth over him, I figure I should just go with something a little bit more simple over that middle back area, as the cloth is pulled down a bit more towards the bottom. And this really shows how you have to adapt on a per character basis, because a back mesh of one character might be completely different and higher or lower density to another. And as long as you're confident with reforming topology and you're able to push the vertices where you want them, it makes the job a lot easier. So from there, let's move on to the shoulder. I'm going to make an edge out of these 2 vertices, subdivide once, and then do the same, one more loop in, and just join all the faces together. So we've got 2 quads and a diamond quad there that helps make the edge loop flow around the outside of the shoulder muscle. And here in my side reference, you can notice that there's some bone and muscle there that makes that area jut out quite a bit, so I'm pushing those vertices back. And then inward with this last row of vertices here, just to show some definition between the back and the shoulder. So that looks pretty good. So for now, I'm just going to select all of the vertices along the mirror point at the back, except for the bottom one. I'm going to turn off clipping, and then I can just move the vertices out, and that will split them away from the center. I can then extrude inward, and then just move the vertices inward a bit again towards the chest, and then just join all those faces together. And because I've got a mirror point, I'm going to have to put 2 tris there, but once we get rid of mirroring later, we'll turn that into a quad. So that will just help give the look of the muscles around the spine dipping in. So I'm just adding a circle now I'm going to model a little bit separately and join later, just so I have something a little bit easier to work with. I'm just going to box select all of the mask and face objects and just move them to layer 5. And then I'll move them back again, just so I've got an option to hide them later if I need to. Just making a couple of small tweaks here around the neck area, just as I did to the top of the head earlier, just making it a little bit wider. Now I'll just delete one side of the vertices and then add a mirror modifier as I start to model the collar of our ninja's coat, I guess you could call it. And to make things easier to see, I can just turn on and off layer 5 that has all my mask and face objects on it. Just placing the vertices starting up a bit higher at the back of the neck and working down towards the collar. And I've joined that circle that I made for the collar to the torso with Control J. I might work more on this big gap in the top of the back area here. I've just selected those vertices and extruded them all to the center, which makes them all meet at the mirror point. And then I can just pull out the vertices again like I did with the lower area of the back and extrude them again to the middle to create some more detail with vertices. Now this little gap that remains is a bit where quite a few muscle groups meet at the spine. So I'll just work on adding a little bit more detail to that area. If I really need to get rid of some detail in the mesh, I can always just grab 3 vertices and merge them together. And basically from there you can, usually most times, form a diamond quad out of the remains. I'll then merge these vertices to my collar trace. Moving back to the collar and neck now, and I'm just going to move some of these vertices up and just get a nice neck outline. I'm going to just move some of these vertices up by grabbing a few of them, rotating them and moving them all upward, and that will just get the spread of vertices a little bit better rather than having them all clumped and straight at the bottom and then this huge gap up to the top of the collar. And I'm still not quite happy with this back area where the muscles really connect to a point. So I'm just going to delete some edges here. And luckily I've got this kind of area that I can play within. All these face loops come to a point here, so I can really just play around with connecting and reconnecting edges. And basically just by looking at some anatomy and thinking about how I can use some mesh techniques to get the same look as what I'm seeing. So I'm going to try and attach these edges together and form a face that makes this loop curve around the bottom and then back up on the other side. And then I can extrude these 2 edges out, which of course will allow me to connect these faces together and keep everything as quads. So now I'm just going to extrude this whole collar loop that I made upward. And I'll just match the vertices directly to the bottom of the mask so that there's no gaps, as once again there's no mesh on the inside there. Now to give some definition to the collar, I'm just going to make a loop cut here and drag it quite close to the bottom of the face loop. And then I can spread some of the extra vertices outward more, just so there isn't too much of a direct line between the neck and the collar and shoulders. And I can even afford to push some of the vertices out a little bit, just to show the definition of the collar later when we extrude it inward and show its thickness. But for now, there's our torso blocked, and in the next chapter we'll go through adding details to match to our concept.